Hi, everybody. So I'm Lark, Starkey, and I'm from the State Water Resources Control Board. And just to get a feeling of how many have already seen this, we was on this webinar last Friday. Okay, so not a ton of people, that's good. If you were, it's not a ton of new information, so apologies in advance. Moving forward, so as many of you know, this project's been in the works for quite a while. We started out in July 2014. We had one release of our documents in January of 2018, and then we just recently re-released our revised documents on July 6th, so about a week and a half ago. And we will be taking the bacterial provisions to the board on August the 7th. And so again, the meeting is going to be on August 7th, and this is for adoption of Part 3 of the Water Quality Control Plan for inland surface waters to establish that, and then also to amend the Water Quality Control Plan for the ocean sands, the bacteria provisions. And so the Part 3 of the SWRCB and the ocean plan amendment are referred to as bacteria provisions, and the provisions are essentially the regulations for the bacteria. And I'm going to go over the bacteria provisions, the purpose of them, illness rate, the objectives, the effects on basin plans, the limited water contact recreation beneficial use, implementation provisions, the water quality standards variance, and impact on other programs and regulations. So the purpose of the bacteria provisions is primarily to protect public health. They also provide statewide consistency and avoid the need for individual basin plan amendments. And they help to align state objectives with the U.S. EPA objectives for further consistency. There is an illness rate and definition, water quality objectives, a beneficial use definition, again, that limited water contact recreation or LRF1 beneficial use, and they identify implementation elements and identify water quality standards variance policies. Okay, so this graph depicts the U.S. EPA 2012 recreational water quality criteria for illness rates. So they had two recommended illness rates, both which they decided were equally protective, one at 32 per 1,000 primary contact recreators and one at 36 per 1,000 primary contact recreators. They also established thresholds for Enterococci and E. coli that aligned with those recommended illness rates. And so we are proposing the slightly more protective illness rate of 32 per 1,000 primary contact recreators. And as a bit of a refresher, the bacteria objectives that are currently in the ocean plan are for total coliform, fecal coliform, and Enterococcus, as well as the total coliform to fecal coliform ratio. They're calculated by a 30-day geometric mean and a single sample maximum. For the inland waters, there's no current statewide objectives, so the regional boards all have a different objective. And so, for example, in the Colorado River, they have an objective for E. coli, Enterococci, and fecal coliform, while in the Central Coast, they only have a fecal coliform objective. And so, again, by providing a statewide objective, it's going to help to provide some consistency. And so going back to the January release of documents, this is what was proposed. So for all waters where the salinity is equal to or less than 1 part per thousand, 95% or more of the time, we are proposing a sole indicator of E. coli. And so this is fresh waters. I should clarify that, so lakes and rivers and et cetera. For all waters, the salinity is greater than 1 part per thousand, more than 5% of the time, we're proposing Enterococci as the sole indicator. And so this is ocean waters, but it's also potentially things like inland bays or estuaries. We were proposing a 6-week geometric mean instead of the 30-day geometric mean, and a statistical threshold value instead of a single sample maximum. And again, attaching that illness rate of 32 per thousand primary contact recreators. Okay, so moving forward to our current proposal and the documents that were released a few weeks ago. For the inland surface waters and closed bays and estuaries, the SWRCB provisions, nothing changed. So we still have, I should say say nothing changed as compared to those January documents. Things did change as compared to what we currently have. So for the drinking waters, we are proposing E. coli as that sole indicator for fresh waters, rivers and oceans, rivers and lakes, etc. And Enterococci for the sole indicator for inland saline waters, enclosed bays and estuaries, etc. It's going to be calculated with a 6-week rolling geometric mean and a statistical threshold value. I'm going to go over the geometric means and the statistical threshold value and all those kind of calculation methods a little bit later on in the presentation as well. Give you a heads up. They're calculated in colony forming units, and we're using that same illness rate of 32 per 1,000. All right, and so for ocean waters is where the change really happened as compared to the January release of the document. So now, instead of only having Enterococci as the sole indicator for ocean waters, we're proposing to add an Enterococci objective and retain the fecal coliform objective as is currently written in the ocean plan. So for Enterococci, we have that 6-week rolling geometric mean and a statistical threshold value. And that's calculated in a static manner every calendar month. We have the colony forming unit and the 32 per 1,000 primary contact respirators. For fecal coliform, because it's getting retained as is currently written in the ocean plan, we don't have all of those elements right now. We have the 30-day geometric mean and the single sample maximum. And there's I guess, yeah, that's all. So we realize there's a few inconsistencies here between what the calculations between Enterococci and fecal coliform, and we are doing a recreational review at the statewide level and kind of updating the fecal coliform objective to be in line with some of these other metrics is a project that will be on the triennial review. All right, so why did we retain the fecal coliform? Well, certainly before the previous adoption date, it came to light that there are several California-specific studies that provided data that fecal coliform is a better indicator of gastrointestinal illness during certain water exposures and environmental conditions. Now, this isn't to say that Enterococci is not a good indicator. Enterococci is a good indicator, and if you had to choose one, we would probably choose Enterococci, but there's certain circumstances is that the fecal coliform catches instances of illness that Enterococci doesn't. And when we were going through the studies, it also came to light that the U.S. EPA 2012 criteria for which the water quality objectives were initially based didn't really fully consider fecal coliform as their criteria. So the study for which they were based didn't test for fecal coliform because its previous iteration has already kind of discounted that as an indicator. And this probably makes sense on this big, broad national level because they're looking at the whole U.S. And they're trying to decide what's the most efficient and effective indicator for this big national basis. However, because we're in California, we're focusing specifically on California, it makes sense for us to retain fecal coliform because of this very California-specific information. All right, and so going forward to E. coli and Enterococci and how that can be calculated. So both of them are going to be calculated on this 6-week rolling basis. And so after you get 6 weeks of data, you're going to get your first calculation. And then going forward, you'll drop off the oldest week and add the newest week. So you get a new calculation for weeks 2 to 7. And again, dropping off that old week of data, adding the new. So you have this calculation that kind of rolls forward in time. Now, for the statistical threshold value, it's calculated in a single calendar month. And it is based on a discrete data set within that month. So the STD is calculated within that 30-day period, that calendar month period. And when a new 30-day period comes around, a whole different discrete data set is used for that calculation. And again, as it goes forward, it's that discrete data set instead of using any of the data from previous calculation periods. All right. And so for fecal call form, since it's based on that since it's getting retained, and it's based on what we currently have on the ozone plant, it's calculated within that 30-day period based on the 5 most recent samples. And it doesn't specify rolling or static, and we've heard from different entities that they're calculated in various ways. And so we're not specifying right now. So if you calculate it in a rolling manner, it's based on those 5 most recent samples within the past 30 days. So you'll get one calculation with 30 days. And as you go forward, the oldest sample is dropped off and your newest sample is added within that 30-day time period. And so again, you drop the oldest sample, add a new one, and so it kind of rolls forward in time. And for the static TN, again, it's just going to be based on the 5 most recent samples within that 30-day time period. And when you move over to the next 30 days, again, using the discrete data set of the 5 most recent samples within your next 30-day time period, and et cetera. For the single sample matchment, it's a bit more of a simple calculation. There's a certain threshold that you cannot exceed. And if you do exceed that, that's counted kind of as a violation and exceeded. And so for fecal call form, that threshold is set at 400 per 100 milliliters, which is represented by the kind of orange red line there. And if you have a sample, such as this one that I've highlighted here, that would count as exceeded. But if your sample represented by those little blue dots is under your threshold, then you're meeting the objective. Okay, and I did add a slide on the threshold value because we had a lot of questions on this during last week's webinar. And so if you're calculating the statistical threshold value, and again, you have these blue dots that represent all of your samples, then not more than 10% of the samples can exceed that threshold. So if it's set at 110, represented by that red line again, and you have a really great sampling entity that is sampling every day for 30 days, then 3 of those samples can exceed that threshold, and if you have 3 samples that exceed that threshold, then it is 10% of the time it hasn't been exceeded, and that's bad if you get a little exceeded against you. However, say you're sampling for that 30 days and you only have 2 samples that is over that threshold, then it's only 7% of the time those samples have exceeded, and so then you're all right, and you don't get an exceeding mark against you. So, yeah, and again, I just want to emphasize that we do recognize that there's some inconsistencies between these calculations, and we recognize that and are working on it. As for effects on the basin plan, except for site-specific objectives, the proposed revisions supersede numeric water quality objectives currently in basin plan, but do not supersede the narrative water quality objective. Okay, so just to check in really quickly, we've gone through the purpose, the illness rate, the objectives, and the effects on the basin plan. And going forward, I'll talk a little bit about that LREC1, beneficial use, implementation provisions, water quality standards variance, and the impact on other programs regulations. All right, so limited water contact recreation. This is only applicable to the weedy waters, so that is inland waters. And it's uses of water that support limited recreational activities involving body contact with water, where activities are probably limited by physical conditions. And body contact with water and ingestion of water is infrequent or insignificant. And I put this photo up here as kind of an example of something that could be designated as an LREC water. As you can see, it's really shallow, so that kind of limits the body contact or ingestion of water. And it's also in this channel, and it has this fence, and so it makes it a lot harder to get into. However, every water body is very different, and so just because there's a fence doesn't mean that it's going to be an LRC water, or just because it's really shallow doesn't mean that it has that designation. And it's simply an option for the regional boards to use if they think that it would be valuable. And it provides value at the statewide level because then there is consistency in the definition. The provisions also have optional implementation provisions included. And so these include a reference system or anti-degradation approach, natural sources exclusion approach, high-flow suspension or seasonal suspension of one beneficial uses for SWRCB waters. And again, they're not requirements, they're options for implementation. It also describes the water quality standards variants identified in the federal regulatory framework. And this can be used for any pollutant, but it's just identified, again, as an option for bacteria. It describes the requirements of a federal rule, which includes discharge-specific variances, water body-specific variances, and it doesn't add or limit the rule, and is also subject to a public participation requirement, and is not effective until approved by US EPA. And again, this explains the process that's already available under existing law. As for impacts on Title 17 and the AB 411 speech notification levels, there's no change here. This is a Department of Public Health regulation and not a water board regulation, so we just don't have the authority to change this. And thus, agencies regulated under Title 17 will continue to sample and report on total call form, fecal call form, and Enterococci. And the data collected will continue to be used to support 303D listed the next line of evidence support away. As for impacts on the 303D listed waters or bacteria impairment, they are subject to reevaluation under the normal integrated report cycle. But based on an internal review by the water board, we don't see any significant change in the 303D listing. As for TMDL, the proposed bacteria objectives will not supersede an existing TMDL. However, the regional boards may evaluate the effectiveness of TMDL in attaining best beneficial use as a regional scenario. All right, so moving forward, again, we had those documents released on July 6th, and on August 7th, we will be taking this to the board. All right, and you can find all those documents on the water board website under the link there, and please feel free to ask any questions of myself, Karen, or Lori. And with that, we'll take any questions, and I do want to know that Lori Weber is on the phone, and she's a good resource too, and might be able to help me out. Questions, anyone? Great, thanks, Lark.
Yeah, so anyone in the room, could you unmute your mic first before you want to talk? It'll turn green, and then go ahead. Is that one, Jason?
Yeah. I have a question about the interpretation of using a variance in the context of an MS4 permit. We've had discussions about the original inclusion of that in the federal rule was more applicable to NPDES permits in terms of point source discharges rather than something that would, involve watershed management plans and large scale kind of things. And also the fact that we would, the way that I've interpreted it is a very strictly time delineated kind of excuse to, not meet an objective in a particular water quality, in a water body. And so the question is this even going to work in terms of water bodies that are receiving discharges from MS4 permits? Will it apply to an MS4 as an NPDES permit in that way that I think that it may have been intended by federal rule? I don't know.
So a water quality standard variance is a limited time period, a kind of allowance to let entity get to a place where they can address those water quality standards. But I'm not totally familiar with the permitting process, so Lori, do you have any insight here? Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks, Lark. I didn't hear the question very well. I think what I heard was, does the variance policy apply to MS4 permits? Is that correct?
Yes. In terms of how would you write it? How would you write that variance and apply it to an MS4 permit?
That's something that that level of detail is not in the staff report. Is the question how to apply it, or how does it apply? I guess is the question, because it's part of a legal question.
I talked with their MS4 person yesterday about this, and it's kind of a fuzzy distinction between a watershed management plan, where they give themselves, where the responsible party would give themselves timelines to, implement BMPs in the expectation that at the end of however many years they will have met the objective. Whereas a variance would be more like, okay, you have 2 years to figure out whatever it is you're going to figure out. And at the end of that period of time, if you don't,
okay. Yeah, I think that's an implementation question that, kind of the nuts and bolts of implementation that we'd have to work out with you. Are you at the water boards, or do you represent the board? Okay.
I'm talking in context of Newport Bay and also the revision of our MS4 permit. That's kind of coinciding with reevaluating the TMDL for Newport Bay. And if a variance would be an option in the new MS4 permit, or would it apply to the new MS4 permit? So that's
I think we'd have to have that's like a detailed implementation discussion that I'd like to have with you offline, and probably pull in our legal staff.
Right, and that's where it is.
It's a little too detailed for like the staff report and the actual objectives, but happy to talk with you offline about that.
Okay, I would appreciate that. I could get our permitting person too on the line, and so that would be good.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. If you wanted to just kind of contact me offline, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, great, thank you.
And Lori's email and phone number is just out there.
Yeah, my phone number is up there. Email.
I have a question. This is Jennifer with Humboldt Baykeeper. Are you planning on having a carve out for Region 1, since our basin plan is more protective than what you're proposing?
Yeah, so the current proposal is, I'm not sure what you mean by carve out, but the current proposal is Region 1 has a fecal coliform objective that we will be superseding, but we'll be superseding the numeric objective, but not the narrative objective.
Right, so now you're going to be allowing 2 times as many illnesses as what we currently allow. I don't understand how you can justify superseding that.
The justification is that the numeric objective was based on protection of high quality water and not tied to recreational beneficial uses. We want to have a statewide consistency on Rec 1, protection of recreational beneficial uses. You do have a narrative objective in Region 1, which would allow you to actually set an even lower number and high-quality waters that you want to protect. There's also, an anti-degradation policy that wouldn't allow. So we wouldn't allow any, kind of degradation in water quality.
All right. Well, we already have the 2 of the top 10 most polluted beaches in the state, so they're already pretty degraded. My understanding.
Yeah. So are they impaired? Are those beaches impaired?
Yes, they are.
Then they'd be subject to a TMDL.
So my understanding is Lake Tahoe has a carve out. Is that going to still stand, the Tahoe region?
Tahoe region has a numeric objective for fecal coliform that we are not superseding because it is not tied to the Rec 1. It's not tied to Rec 1 beneficial uses.
What's it tied to?
It's tied to nothing. I mean, their basin plan does not specifically link their objectives to beneficial uses, which is kind of interesting for most other basin plans do.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And are you, I'm happy to talk about this in a little more detail if you want to, if you have any more detailed questions, please give me a call.
Yeah, well, the California Coastkeeper Alliance submitted comments about a year ago on all of this, and I was hoping that you had changed your mind based on our comments.
My understanding, based on my read of the response to comments, we have responded to those, so I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to kind of read through the response to comments, and then if you have any more questions, give me a call.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
This is Karen Black. So we appreciate those questions, and perhaps you could email them to Lark and or Lori, because we'd love to address them, but we also want to move forward with the agenda so that we don't run over the time. So appreciate that.